Hello, my name is Stephen Beaumont. I hold a PhD in Business Management and I'm the head researcher at Centro de Tecnología para el Desarrollo. This is a non-profit research institution based in Buenos Aires in Argentina. The topic of this presentation will be e-education for leaders of non-profit organizations. Prioritizing content over technology enhances productivity. So let us begin saying that in Latin America, as in other developing countries, civil society organizations, commonly referred to as CSOs or NPOs for non-profit organizations, often have certain institutional weaknesses that undermine the effective implementation of their missions. This problem is accentuated when it comes to small organizations that operate locally, that is, in the neighborhoods, since they tend to be staffed by highly motivated volunteers who are not adequately prepared for many of the tasks they face. Our non-profit, founded in 2003, with the mission to contribute to the development, strengthening and professionalization of the civil society organizations through training and specialized consulting, in order to improve their performance, effectiveness and efficiency, and thus achieve a greater impact on society in general. In the year 2007, we created the International Virtual Training Center to provide distance learning for non-profit leaders. Today, it offers 14 different courses in Spanish and 3 in English, some of which have been delivered in over 30 editions. These courses have been taken by over 2,000 people from 24 countries. These educational processes are constantly reviewed, and the feedback from the participants is used to improve different aspects such as curricular design, methodology, evaluation, etc. One issue that has arisen both from student input and from benchmarking against other organizations and e-education programs is the impact of latest trending technology on our educational process design. This paper argues that many e-education programs rely too much on designing high-tech learning environments instead of prioritizing the actual educational process design. This, in turn, affects a significant amount of would-be students who do not have access or do not master the latest trending software and hardware tools. By slightly scaling down tech requirements, we could target a greater number of students, thus achieving a more efficient goal of training a greater number of these leaders of non-profit organizations. This paper also describes in detail how we have conducted the surveys that lead to these conclusions, what limitations in implementations, high-end technology solutions are most often encountered, and which we consider that would be most feasible solutions to optimize the relation between technology and content. Let's describe briefly the educational process involved. The educational process designed for distance learning for non-profit organizations, as well as most e-education programs, rely basically on 3 major components: curricular design, teaching strategies, and e-education learning environments. First of all, the curricular design. Let us say, what exactly is the core knowledge we wish to transmit? Let us ask the question, what should a social leader know, and what would be convenient for them to know? How do we choose the priority issues? We have to choose the appropriate content and structure it accordingly to be able to effectively communicate it and thus achieve a successful learning process. The curriculum is an attempt to communicate the principles and features of an educational purpose in a way that it remains open to critical discussion and can be effectively implemented. The central problem of any curriculum project is that of content, and in a more general sense, knowledge. The didactic transposition is the adaptive transformation process, whether it involves distortion, substitution, or creation of knowledge, by which scholarly knowledge constitutes itself in the knowledge or object to be taught, and in turn, knowledge or object actually taught. Without an effective curriculum design, it will not be possible to achieve a positive impact on these leaders of non-profit organizations. Secondly, we have teaching strategies. Having selected the content, one also must choose the appropriate teaching strategies to achieve the desired goal. In general, these teaching strategies can be classified as the teaching of organized forms of knowledge through direct intervention strategies, that is, exposition, interrogation, etc. The other case would be strategies focused on indirect forms of teacher intervention. This is, for example, the case of case studies, problem-based learning, inquiry, etc. And lastly, we find the skills training through simulation and control practice. Third, we have the e-education learning environments. An aspect that is also important is the channel that will be used to implement this learning process. Since we now have efficient and economical information and communication technologies which are increasingly accessible, this will enable us to deliver knowledge in a more effective way to increasing numbers of people. But we must remember that these are only channels and that the main importance is in the developed content. By combining these three components, we will be able to build soundly based educational proposals that meet the growing requirements of training, continuing education, and a more professional aspect of leaders of civil society organizations. Let us now see briefly a bit about student feedback on technology in e-education learning environments. As we have discussed in any successful educational process, feedback from the participants plays an important role to improve the different aspects such as curricular design, methodology, evaluation, etc. One issue that has frequently arisen is the issue of the impact of latest trending technology on our educational process design. As well as taking note of spontaneous feedback from online students, we have conducted a number of surveys among these participants so as to understand their particular needs as far as learning environments and the use of information technology in their homes and our workplaces. Without going into full detail because of time restraints in this presentation, let me just mention some relevant results from these surveys. First of all, we have hardware issues. One thing that appears is the age of the computers students use. Over 68% of students surveyed answered that they use computers which are 2 or more years old. This is quite significant, and more significantly so, is that only 3.1% have a computer which has been bought in the previous 6 months. That clearly states that technology, as far as hardware, the computer, the main component, isn't really up to date as probably it would be in rather more developed countries. Now, for example, 92.6% use digital cameras, whereas only just over 57% have webcams on the desktop computers. That means that it's not really very much used. For example, although 81% of students use some kind of social network, only 27% use Skype to communicate regularly. For example, when asked if a problem of video conference arose, over 80% said that at some point in virtual education or e-learning instances, they had had connectivity problems with video conference. This is mainly due to bandwidth in Latin America and internet accessibility. Okay, another point would be operating systems. In Latin America, only just over 5% use Macintosh, but although over 90% use Windows, only over 50% use Windows XP, which is a really practically obsolete version of Windows. Notwithstanding, it's the main operating system running on today's students' computers. Not going into more statistics because they're kind of boring, let's see just some other general issues brought to us by students. Although email communication has presented some problems, as a number of other prospective students have mentioned, the problems of spam block in some education institutions, meaning that legitimate inquiries are treated as spam, has created an issue while trying to enroll in e-education programs or even just request information. As opposed to this, many e-education platforms rely on automated inscription. But that has also caused problems because some students have had difficulties trying to access these formulas. Another of the most frequent complaints of online students is the availability of tutors or coordinators to be able to answer inquiries and assist students in general problems. Although we see that there are a lot of facts, frequently asked questions, and guidance material on the websites, there is generally a lack of coordinators or tutors available. Other instances have to do with feedback from tutors or coordinators, teachers, you name it. Some online platforms rely on what is called peer evaluation to be able to successfully complete the courses. The obvious advantage of having the students themselves evaluate each other's assignments and then automate the grading process is that the whole system requires fewer tutors or instructors. But this system in turn presents some serious problems. The main issue that students complain about is that, upon receiving negative or useless feedback, they question the competence of their evaluators. In a course with a great amount of participants who possess very different backgrounds and academic trajectory, a PhD can be evaluated by someone with no university studies whatsoever, for example. This is the case, obviously, in open courses, what are called MOOCs, Massive Open Online Courses. Well, as time is running out, let's jump to the conclusions. And let us say that whereas information technology has provided us with a fabulous means of providing education, we cannot ignore the point that this is merely the channel used for delivering the process and not an ultimate goal in itself. Technology is of huge importance, but the main focus must be placed on curricula and design and teaching strategies. We find that many e-education programs rely too much on designing high-tech learning environments instead of prioritizing the actual educational process design. This, in turn, affects a significant amount of would-be students who do not have access or do not master the latest trending software and hardware tools. By slightly scaling down tech requirements, we could target a greater number of students and achieve a more efficient goal of training a greater number of students. After all, e-education programs should ideally be designed to be as inclusive as possible so as to reach the greatest audience possible. Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure presenting this paper to you.